Hey guys, my name is Marta, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about everything that I read in my second year of university. I did a part 1 to this video with everything that I read on my first year last September, and it was a video that got a lot of views, so now that I finished my second year, I thought it would be great to film an update and talk about everything that I read this second year. And as I have a lot of books to talk about because I am doing 2 degrees, French and English, I am going to stop here and start talking about the texts. I'm going to begin talking about what I read during my first term, and for English I took a class on American literature from its origins to the 19th century and one on English theatre from the 20th and 21st century. And then for French I had one about medieval and Renaissance literature. Starting with the American literature class, because I do not have any physical book to show, we got to read fragments from fundamental texts from that time period. We read fragments from John Smith, William Bradford, Mary Rowlandson, some poems by Anne Bradstreet. Later on we also read poems by Walt Whitman. We read a short story from Poe, which was The Fall of the House of Usher, and Irving's Rip Van Winkle. We also read some slave narratives. We read fragments from Ulandakianos, and we read Harry Jacobs' slave narrative in its entirety, which is, I think, the text that I enjoy the most besides the poems by Walt Whitman and the Poe short story. We also got to read some fragments from Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and other people that I do not want to talk about. To be honest, I didn't really like this class. So now, moving on from that class, I'm going to talk about the books that I read for what I think was my favorite class of the entire academic year, which was my English theatre class. We started talking about the late 19th century texts, so we talked about Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, which I read and really enjoyed, but it wasn't an assigned reading. I just read it because I wanted to know what we were talking about. I am not going to then talk much about it, but it's a comedy, it's really funny, and I really recommend it. Also, it's Oscar Wilde, so it's very witty, and it's something that you can not read if you like Oscar Wilde. Next, we move on to realist theatre, and we started with Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, which is a play that broke with everything that was established before in the theatre. It's a play that does not only break the audience expectations because of the title, but that also discusses very modern themes, such as the women's situation, as our main character is a woman, Eliza, as well as social classes. And the play is all about Higgins, who decides that who takes the challenge to change the way Eliza speaks and to turn her into a proper lady, so he can have her own flower shop. It's a play that I really enjoyed and that I am excited to reread in the future, and that has made me now very excited to check out other texts by Bernard Shaw because he was a very prolific playwright, so I have quite a lot of things to read by him. Next, we moved on to the 20s and we read an Irish play, which was You and the Peacock by Sean O'Casey. This is the second part of his Dublin trilogy, which I read in its entirety back in January because I wanted to know how the other plays were like. And it's a very symbolic play, besides being about real events and being apparently a realist play. It's about what went on during the entire conflict in Ireland in the 20s, so between the Civil War and the War of Independence and all of that. It's a book that really discusses the effects on the war as well as the class divisions. It's a tragicomedy, so it's got its sad stuff as well as its funny lines. It's overall a play that I really enjoyed one that I am looking forward to rereading. I want to reread the entire trilogy, to be honest, because I wanted to review it, but I did not have time for that, so I will probably do that in a not so far away future. Next, we did a time jump to the 50s and we read Sheila Delaney's A Taste of Honey. This is a very sweet play about a mother and a daughter struggling to live in during a bad economic period. This is a book that discusses a lot of the problems that the young population had to face in the 50s. It's a very sweet story that is very funny with the lines that I really enjoyed, but that has at the same time this very sad atmosphere because of the situation that the characters are facing. It's also a play that has a gay character, which was something that wasn't common in this time period. And yeah, it was directed by John Littlewood, which was a very experimental director that I encourage you to read about because what he did was fascinating. So yeah, a play that I really enjoyed, and I am looking forward to reading more from this playwright. Still in the 50s, of course, we read the most important play from that movement, which is Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. This was a voluntary play, but I did a class presentation alongside a friend on it. Yeah, it's about this man, Jimmy, who is married with Alison and who doesn't treat her well at all. He is very angry at the fact that his expectations after World War II haven't been met, and he has these very long monologues that make him an insufferable character. But yeah, but that you have to read in order to understand the play. It's a play that, as I just said, the characters aren't good, but that is fascinating to study, and I did not rate it because I didn't know whether I liked it or not. But yeah, it's a play that discusses themes like class, and that besides being apparently released like Juno and the Peacock, has its own symbolism going around, which is very fascinating to read about, because when I was reading criticism for the presentation, I read quite a lot about that, and it was very interesting. Next, we moved on to absurd theatre. So of course we read some Beckett. We got to Happy Days, which is a play about this woman, Winnie, who is buried in the sand and alongside her husband, Willie. And she basically goes around her day speaking. It's a play in which basically he spends the entire text speaking with no answer. It's an absurd play that I love because I love absurd theatre, but for some people may not be good at all. It's also Beckett, and I love Beckett, so I knew that I was going to love it. Yeah, a fascinating play that I do not have much to talk about because it has no plot. Some people also did a presentation on The Dumb Waiter, so I also read that. It's by Harold Pinter. It's another absurd play, but with more action and theme. It's about these two characters who are waiting to be called to do some business, which looks like it's going to be killing someone. It's a very intriguing play that has a lot of tension going on, and that I really recommend. After reading that, I got to read two other plays by Pinter because I wanted to, and I really enjoyed them, so I am excited to read more from him because, same as Shaw, he has a lot of plays, so I have a lot to read if I want to. Next, we read Khalil Church's Top Girls. This is a very fascinating play, which is made up of three different tabloids, that I would say. The first one is this very iconic scene where women from very different periods are having a dinner. This second one takes place in an office where they are hiding people, and the last one takes place at home. It's a play that discusses female power and female empowerment. It's a very powerful play with a lot of strong lines, but at the same time one that also discusses other themes like making decisions and leaving things behind in order to have a better future. So basically that is one that discusses the sacrifices that some women had to make in order to have some sort of power, I would say, in this time period. It's a book that I really enjoy, and Churchill has become one of my favorite playwrights because I've also read Far Away by her, but yeah, I really like her and I am excited to read more from her. Next, I read another play that wasn't assigned but that some people did a presentation on, and it is Winsome Pinnock's Leave Taking. This is a book about two Jamaican siblings that discusses themes such as immigration, such as wanting to learn about one's past, as well as about women in this time period, because the 80s was a time of where women started to question their position in society. So yeah, it's a play that I really enjoy, but one that I read in a rush because I think I read in a day, so I would like to get back to it and reread it because it was also very sweet, I think. I think I could have gotten more from it, so I am excited to reread it. Next, I read another text that I absolutely adored and that I have now become obsessed with the author, and it is Sarah Kane's Blasted. This is a book that I talked about when I discussed my favorite books last year, and it's a play that takes place in this hotel. It's a very devastating story, very violent, with very shocking scenes. It's a play that I adore, it's a play that I am obsessed with, and Sarah Kane is a woman that I want to read everything from, and yeah, fascinating, adored it. Please read it if you can handle heavy themes, because this has some heavy themes being discussed, such as rape, war, fatality. It's amazing, if you can't guess by how I talk about it. Next, we read two plays from this century, which were Lucy Careywood's The Children, which is a play in which there has been this nuclear explosion thing and everything is devastated. So there are two women that are discussing whether they want to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the youth or not. It's a play that is very interesting because of how it deals with time. Everything takes place, the story takes place at the same time as the audience is seeing it, so there are no time jumps, it's only a scene. It's really fascinating, devastating, but also somehow really sweet at the same time. It's a play that really makes you question how we act as humans, and yeah, very interesting. I want to read more from Kirkwood. I have one of her plays listed as want to read in Goodreads, so I will probably get to that one when I feel like it. And lastly, we read Scorch by Stacey Brake. This is a play that discusses gender, and it's a play that is a monologue and that has only a character whose name is Kes. It's a very interesting story, a very sweet and sad one at the same time. It discusses injustice as well as the online world in a way. It's very interesting, very short, and I really recommend it. Stacey Brake also gave a little talk at my university talking a bit about the play, and that was a great event to attend, so yeah, really recommend reading this one. Now moving on to what I read from my French medieval class. We, as in any medieval course, started with the epics, so we read La Chanson de Roland. This is the French epic, a text about Roland, who is this very brave soldier who wants to fight against the Spanish. It's, as I said, an epic, so surreal things happen that wouldn't happen in real life, like people cutting horses in half. It's a short text, despite what this edition looks like, because it has the text in medieval and in modern French. So it reads pretty fast, it's entertaining, it's weirdly entertaining, but nothing special, nothing that I particularly liked, but it's an important text, and it's important to read it if you are into ancient texts or if you are majoring in French. So I had to read it. I am glad I read it. Now I know about it. We also read Tristan, which we read the version of Thomas, and this is a book with all the different versions, but we only got to that one. It's the love story between Tristan and Iseult. You probably have heard about it. These two people that fall in love after drinking from this poison. It's about their impossibility of being together, the struggles they have to face, the power of their love, and yeah, it's hilarious because Tristan is crazy in love, and I had so much fun reading about his obsessions with Iseult, even though they were a bit too much sometimes. We also read The Le by Maggie de France. This is a collection of short stories. Basically, they are inspired by Breton mythology, and the author claimed to have heard them from Great Britain. They are overall very mythological-esque, very fantastical, very magical, with their knights, with their princess, and with princesses. They are great to read, they are short and sweet. I really enjoy them. I think they were one of my favorite things I read in this class. And yeah, I do recommend this if you are looking for some medieval literature that is short and sweet. And last, about the medieval things, we read La Farce du Maître Patelin, which is a play, a comedy, a farce. It's about a man, Patelin, who claims to be the one that knows how to fool everyone, and he fools this seller when he buys stealing this piece of tissue, and later on gets fooled by another one. It's a play that is really funny, really comedic, as any farce. I really enjoyed it. It was fun, and it has the famous line of Revenons à nos moutons. It's really funny. I recommend it. I don't know if it's translated to English, but if you speak French, if you can read French, I do recommend it. It's short and funny. It's short, and I am sure you will have a great time reading it. I also read some other farces for a paper I had to write. So here's that. I don't remember the titles right now. I don't have the titles with me right now. But I also read some others. They were funny, but not as funny as this one, because this is the most popular farce from this time period. Next, we read some Renaissance poetry. So we read some texts by Agrippa d'Aubigné, Ronsard, Marot, Maurice Sèvres, Louis Labé, and other people that I am not going to list. They were love poems, as any Renaissance poem would be. Most of them were sonnets, some of them weren't, some of them played more with language than others. But yeah, not the best thing I've read, but at least they were bearable, because when I talk about my other French literature class, you will have to bear with me criticizing that poetry. Next, we read two stories from L'Heptaméron by Marguerite de Navarre. This is a short story collection in the lines of Boccaccio's Decameron, and it's filled with stories that deal with love along other themes. We read two of them. One of them was more comedic and more similar to farces, such as this one, and the other one was a love story. So yeah, I would actually like to read the entire thing this summer, so expect a review of this entire book later on in the year. And we were also supposed to read Rabelais' Gargantua, but we didn't get to it. I did read it this winter, but we did not discuss it in class, so I am not going to talk about it now. But it was great. It was very grotesque, very funny, and I really enjoyed it. And I want to read the other text in this series, if it can be considered as such. Moving on to the classes that I took on my second term, I had, for English, I had a practical criticism class in which we read short stories and poems from authors that were not English. We read some Camus, some Rilke, some Calvino, and other authors, and I also read Carrie Chartier's Far Away for an essay I had to write. Next, I took a class on English literature that was basically a collection of literature from the Renaissance to modern times. We read a collection of poems ranging to all that time period. We did some Donne, did some Shakespeare, we did some Wordsworth, we did some Eliot, we read the Alfred Prufrock poem, we also read some Seamus Heaney, some Jackie Kay, and other people. I am not going to give the entire list. Then we also did some drama in this class. We read Othello by Shakespeare, and I am not going to talk much about it because we all know what Othello is about, but we mostly discussed how it deals with women and with race. And then we read Beckett's Come and Go and David Greg's Fragile, which is a very interesting play in which the audience has its own role. We also read some short stories for this class. We read Evelyn by James Joyce, The Mark on the Wall by Virginia Woolf, That Polite Way the English People Have by Andrea Levy, and A Private Experience by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. From all these short stories, we mostly studied how they deal with time, as well as other topics that they also discussed. Then moving on to what I read for my French literature in this course, which was the most awful literature course I've ever taken. The literature from the 17th and 18th century, and that is the time period that I hate the most, so that is basically why I did not really like this class. We started with Baroque poetry, which I despise. They were very long poems. We read some Malherbe, some Théophile de Viau, some Saint-Amand, and other people that I did not like a single poem of, and yeah, I am not going to talk about them because I did not like them. Then we read something else that I despise, which was Cyrano de Bergerac, Voyage à la Lune, some weird science fiction tale about this man who goes to the moon and realizes that the moon is that for all the moon people, the earth people are the moon. It's very weird. It criticizes a lot of things of this time period, and it criticizes anthropocentrism basically, and as well as other things. It's awful. I hated it. It's badly written, and it's probably a book that, despite having read 2 times, I never fully got what it talks about, and besides being too difficult, I didn't like it at all. Next, we read some of Jean de La Fontaine Fable. I do not have much to talk about. They were entertaining, they were funny. It was funny to read about all these anthropomorphized animals doing things that were seen in that time period society, but they were nothing special. We also got to La Princesse de Clèves by Madame de Lafayette. This was one of the few books that I liked. It's about this woman named who marries Monsieur de Clèves and becomes La Princesse de Clèves. It's a book about love, about maintaining the appearances in the court. It's a piece of historical fiction because it takes place during the kingdom of Henri II. It's entertaining, it's passionate, it makes a great psychological portrait of the characters, and overall it was, I think, the only text I really enjoyed of this class. Next, we read Voltaire's Candide, which is a book that at the beginning I really enjoyed, but that ended up getting a bit tired of. It's about this very innocent man named Candide who travels the world escaping from people and who discovers that things are not as easy and as simple as they seemed when he was living in this castle. It's a book that criticizes Leibniz philosophy. It's a book that criticizes other things such as power and colonization. It's a very satirical book, very ironic at some points, and overall I really like the writing style. I really like the concepts that it dealt with, but I don't know, I found something missing at the end. I didn't really enjoy the entire reading process, but at the same time it's a book that I think that I will get more from when I reread it. Last, we were supposed to read La Philosophie dans le Boudoir by Sade, but we did not get to it, so I just wanted to give it a mention. And last but not least, my other favorite class that I took this academic year was my French prose class. We read contemporary literature, some things from the 20th century, but mostly 21st, and they were all great. We first started with some short stories. We read Holland for Roses for Lucien. This is a short story collection, very dark, very witty, filled with dark humor. I loved it. I found a new favorite author. I now want to read everything by Topor, and yeah, really like it, really enjoyed it, and super happy I discovered this author at university. We also read a short story collection by Laurie Saint-Martin, which was an author that came to my university to give a talk as well. It was Mon Père la Nuit. They are a collection of short stories from this Canadian author, and yeah, really nice, really enjoyed them. Next, we moved on to the autobiographical texts, and we read Nathalie Sarraud's Enfance. This is basically a traditional autobiography in which the author talks about her childhood. It's very violent in a weird way. It's made up of these very weird fragments that are what the author names tropisme, which is the title of another book of her that I own and that I want to read. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the exploration he makes of her feelings and how nice to explain them. It's a text that also has this dual voice because it's made up of a dialogue that he has with herself in order to remember her childhood. It's very interestingly written, and it's one that I really recommend. So read it. Next, I had a fangirl moment in class because we read L'Événement by Annie Ernaux. I am not going to talk much about it because I reviewed its movie not so long ago. So if you want to hear me talk about it, go watch that video. But yeah, it talks about abortion when it was illegal. It's Annie Ernaux. It's very self-reflective as well on the writing process. Really liked it, really adored it, and one of my favorite authors. Please read it. Please read her. Next, we read some books by authors that deal with other stuff such as gender and race. We first read Garçon Manqué by Nina Bogawi, which has been translated to English as Tomboy. It's a book in which the author discusses her identity as a half French, half Algerian person. It's a book that also discusses her sexuality as well as gender, because the way she perceives herself doesn't exactly fit the way he is supposed to perceive herself, because she is, as the title suggests, a tomboy. It's a very interesting book that is written in a very simplistic writing style, which is something that I didn't particularly like, but that might be for some people. So if it intrigues you, read it. If it doesn't, then don't read it. Personally, did not enjoy it that much, but I think it has some good discussions, and I suggest you give it a chance. Next, we read Abdel Tayyab in Melancholy Agab. This is a book that deals with homosexuality. The author is Arab and homosexual, and he wants to vindicate that, because being homosexual is forgiven in a way in his country. It's a book that is made up of 4 different fragments that take place at different times. It's a book that doesn't read that much like an autobiography, but more like fiction. It's very interesting in its exploration of feelings and of this inner need he has of telling the world that what he is. It's very sad, it's heartbreaking at some moments, but it's a book that I personally really liked, and it's an author that I want to read more from. Last 2 books we read for this class were Christine Angost's L'Anceste. This is an ancestors book, as the author would say, in which the author talks about everything, starting by her being in love with this woman for 3 months, what she calls being homosexual from 3 months, as well as the incest he committed as a child with her dad. It's a very complex book with a very difficult writing style that Kieran would say is a wall of texts. It's a book with weirdly punctuation that sometimes doesn't make sense, and it's a book that I don't know whether I enjoyed or not, because it was strange. I would like to read more from this author just to see and explore what else she has to say. But yeah, I do not know if I should recommend this, because it's weird and I think lots of people will not vibe with it, but if it sounds cool to you, I suggest you give it a chance. And lastly, we read Edouard Louis and Finir avec Eddie Bellegueule. This is a book in which the author discusses how he dealt with repriming his homosexuality when he was a child. It's a very difficult book in which themes like bullying and how oppressive living in a small town in which everyone is poor is, and how that made him repress his feelings and the way he was. It's sad, violent, and fascinating in its own unique way. It's a book that I really enjoyed, and also an author that I would like to read more from.
I completely forgot to add that I also read L'Étranger by Albert Camus for my French language class, and that we also read Les Rollats by Maupassant on our second term for the same class. When it comes for my enjoyment for those books, I did not really vibe with L'Étranger, but I did really enjoy Les Rollats, and I am very excited to read more Maupassant. I read Bellamy a few months ago and really enjoyed it, so I am excited to read more from him, hopefully soon.
Yeah, that was all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was long. I tried to go fast so it would not be way too long. Below, if you read any of these, comment down below what books have you studied at the university, if you are doing a literature degree. Comment down below if you want to read any of these. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. Give this video a like if you liked it, and I hope you guys are amazing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!